Hello again, my sweet, wonderful, talented, beautiful recruiting darlings. Rob Stevenson here with another thrilling installment of your favorite recruiting podcast, and today's episode is a little special. My guest is Matt Alder, and among other things, he is a producer and host of the Recruiting Future podcast, so I thought I'd have him on to discuss what he's learned from his guests, and hear also about the case studies he's performed with talent teams at various companies as he wrote his new book, which is coming out soon and which we cover in some detail in this episode. As part of the deal, Intello's very own VP of Talent, Jill Whitty, went over and did an episode of Matt's show. So once you're done here, head over and subscribe to the Recruiting Future podcast, check out his chat with Jill, and together we can all live on in friendly, melodious, non-competitive recruiting podcast harmony. With that, let's get into it. Hope you like it.
Do you want to add value to your business, or do you want to just be this administrative person?
And often, if you look at your talent team and the caliber of talent in your company, they correlate.
You could hire the best person for the job if they were in your candidate pool.
All these individual employees, one by one, together, their voices all come together to articulate the culture of the company.
This is hiring.
Hiring on all cylinders.
Joining me today is a very exciting thinker in the talent space. He is an author, consultant, and the host of an exceptional recruiting podcast called the Recruiting Future podcast. Matt Alder is his name. Matt, thank you so much for Skype commuting in from across the pond.
Absolutely. My pleasure to be here.
Welcome. It's I haven't had another podcast host on before, so I'm really excited to kind of nerd out with you a little bit. We won't do too much of that for the audience, but I guess right off the bat, I'm just curious to hear, we've shared a bunch of similar guests, so I'm just curious, kind of after doing this for, 80, 100 episodes, however many you have, what are some of the things that you're hearing from all these people, that themes you're picking up on?
Yeah, I think there are lots of, there seems to be lots of common ground across talent acquisition globally. Employer brand is a very big one, and the way that employer brand is evolving. So people using their employees as voices, as reviewers, as advocates to get the message about what it's like to work at their company out there. That's certainly something that I'm seeing a lot of. Different ways of recruitment marketing, using technology in recruitment marketing and in sourcing and resourcing in lots of different ways. That's also a common theme. Data analytics is a massive trend. It's something that all of the sort of progressive talent leaders seem to be looking at the moment. And then some other things. One of the things that has been completely consistent is people sort of really looking into their assessment processes and the way that they find and screen talent, and trying to deal with some of the sort of human level unconscious bias that they have, and also sort of trying to diversify their talent base. They're very much the things that seem to come up time and time again.
Thinking about data analytics, there seems to be sort of a general, I don't want to say shrug, but people aren't sure how best they should be using it. Should they hire a dedicated person on the talent team to be a data analyst? Should they just be partnering with other teams in the organization? How have you seen that kind of play out?
Yeah, it's interesting, actually. I did a couple of episodes that were actually dedicated to analytics, and one of them was from a small recruitment team of about 3 or 4 people, and it was really talking about how they were getting started with analytics, some of the sort of the basic things that they were measuring, pulling them together in a spreadsheet and using that to kind of work smarter. And at the other end of the scale, I was talking to someone at a massive organization who had data specialist software, and were really looking at drilling down into the data they had in the whole organization and also externally to the organization to try and make sense of what's going on. So it's kind of become clear that different people are at different stages on this journey. No one I've spoken to thinks they've got it 100% right. So, obviously there's lots of work and lots of discovery to do, but it's something that everyone's looking at from a greater to a lesser extent.
What would that even look like? Just sort of imagining getting it 100% right. I'm just trying to of course, there's so many different variables, but like, where can talent teams start to just give themselves the best chance, you think?
Interesting question. I mean, the two organizations that I kind of referring to, one was the small organization was a fashion tech startup in London called List, and they were very much sort of looking at what data they had available, things like number of interviews that they were doing, lots of stuff, and sort of pulling that together to see if to see where they could find improvements in their process, to look at how they could perhaps educate hiring managers or change their recruitment process and do things differently. So with them, I think it was a case of really looking at the different things that they could measure and what was available, and using that to affect change in the business. The larger organization that I interviewed was Cisco, and obviously they had a kind of a much more sort of a much bigger data set to work from, if you like. So I think it's an interesting topic. I mean, I think analytics is everything from basic statistics to complicated predictive, whatever it might be. And I think what is interesting from these conversations is everyone seems to have a slightly different take on it. And I think it's one of those industry topics that will play out much more in talent acquisition over the next couple of years, and we'll get much more sense of what that analytics journey looks like.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's opportunity at both sides. Like, so you mentioned there's the startup List, and then like Cisco, the massive enterprise company, who has decades of historical data on talent pipelines, as opposed to List, who might only have a couple of years. I think there's opportunity at both stages, though, right? Like, if you love data, you would salivate at Cisco's data set, right? But also, if you're at List, you'd be like, okay, I have an opportunity to track things from an early stage, and then down the line, it's going to be so much easier because I have the opportunity to set up this whole to make sure that we're tracking everything we're supposed to, and from the earliest stage possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's kind of really important. And, I think it's also important that, that I work with quite a few employers on a consulting basis. And, lots of them are struggling to track anything at the moment. So I still think there's lots of work to be done in terms of identifying the data that's out there and actually capturing it properly, so you can kind of go on this journey. So it's a really kind of mixed picture out there.
Yeah. When you say they're struggling to track it, is it because like things weren't set up correctly in their ATS, or they just they left it too late? What's the sort of hurdle there?
So it could be that the current talent acquisition team has inherited an ATS setup that's legacy, that's been there for a while. It could be that the marketing department looks after the careers site, and the stats from that are kind of held somewhere else. It's normally the larger organizations where these things have kind of been set up in the past, and people kind of struggle to actually get get that kind of information they need and get control of that data.
Yeah, this is occurring to me just now. Like, if you were a recruiter thinking about joining an organization, no matter what the size, this might not be something you think to ask, right? Like, hey, what's your data set look like? What's your, how accurately have you been tracking people in your ATS? Who owns the career site? Just because, so you get this, you don't end up signing up for a company has a complete sort of hornet's nest of data in a million different places, if they're even tracking it at all. So it seems like that's something that, if you're going to join an organization, you should try and figure out before you get in there day one. And you're like, all right, now I have to start untying this knot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that I think I've heard in common with lots of the people I've interviewed, quite a few people that I've interviewed are sometimes, within their sort of first 6 or 12 months in their role, and they kind of have these battles in terms of trying to sort of understand what's actually going on, make sense of it, and then affect change. So yeah, I think it's a question that that everyone should ask if they're looking at joining an organization, just to get a sense of what it's going to be like.
Totally. Last week I had Matthew Caldwell on, and he has this conception of recruiters as project managers. And the more I think about it, the more I see this this illustrated. And in this case, like say you start somewhere and you find out the careers page is owned by the marketing department. Like, all right, now you have another manager you have to like parlay with. You have another team you have to try and corral. So it just sort of like adds to that idea. It's like, all right, like they're not even your department, your team, but now you have to work them into your process somehow.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, and I think that always seems to be the common common problem with people who have these issues. There, it's not a sense of lacking the will to go and find this data. It's sometimes just actually getting being able to sort of get your hands on it and make sense of it. So yeah, it's kind of interesting, and I think a lot of it is part of the evolution of the kind of recruitment technology that we're currently seeing.
So the other trend you said you were picking up on was getting more serious about diversity recruiting and doing more than paying lip service to the idea. Yeah, we are committed to having a diverse workforce, but actually taking strides to move those numbers. What sort of common approaches and mindsets have you seen there?
So I think perhaps the interesting thing to zone in on here is, this sense of unconscious bias, and
Sure, yeah.
A number of people that I've interviewed have kind of spoken to this and kind of addressed it. It seems to be that there are a number of stages in terms of understanding this, and I think that the first stage appears to be acknowledging that it's actually an issue. So acknowledging that this does exist, that recruiters, hiring managers, whoever it might be, will inevitably have unconscious bias within the process that will potentially affect the outcome of who they recruit. So I think it's that it's that kind of acknowledgement that appears to be the first step. And I think one of the really interesting companies I spoke to around this is a UK based company called Carillion, and the head of resourcing there kind of really sort of identified this. They wanted to dramatically increase the percentage of female leaders in their organization, and they realized with their current run rate that it was going to take them a very, very long time to sort of hit their targets. So they looked at unconscious bias throughout the organization and implemented an organization-wide training program for not just for recruiters but for hiring managers and pretty much anyone who was kind of interested in this, and they started to see real results from that. So I think it's this kind of awareness, this commitment to do something about it, and really a solution to make people understand that they do this and perhaps put things in place to combat that.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of focus is on like the pipeline stage, is like making sure you have a representative pipeline, but you have to disarm the unconscious bias as well. That's like the next step, I suppose, or the simultaneous step even. Yeah, like you say, awareness is a good start, right? Because no one wants to think that they have this bias. So like, you just gotta educate people and say, this doesn't make you a bad person, but this is common. Here's steps you can take to alleviate this and make sure you're giving everyone the fair shot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Let's talk about your book a little bit. So you've got this book coming out next month, early May in the UK, and then the 28th, I think you said, in the US. It's called Exceptional Talent. So what can people expect from it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've co-authored this with a sort of long-term friend and colleague of mine, a guy called Mervyn Dillon, who I'm sure some of your listeners will have heard of or seen talking at the many conferences that he attends. And really, we were looking at the effect of technology, changes in technology, changes in communication, changes in the talent market globally, and how they're sort of changing and defining what we'd sort of call the new talent journey. So the book starts off very much in the talent attraction segment of things. So looking at problems that companies have getting the attention of the talent that they need. It then moves into talent attraction, recruitment marketing, looking at the recruitment process, looking at things like unconscious bias, looking at some really interesting and exciting technologies that are coming and helping to shape changes in the recruitment process. We then look at onboarding, and then talent development and talent retention and engagement. So it's really looking at this kind of talent life cycle, the journey that someone takes through an organization, and really how that can be joined up, and also how companies might need to think differently about what exceptional talent means in order to get the right people into their organization. So as I said right at the beginning, lots of companies facing skill shortages and difficulties in hiring people, and really thinking about how they can attract, recruit, retain, and develop people who are the right fit for their company in terms of values and in terms of mindset, and really working on the idea that anyone can be exceptionally talented at their job if they're in a job that really works for them. So it was really, really interesting to write. It took us a long time to research. It's kind of very case study based. A lot of the people that I've spoken to on my podcast in the last 2 years feature as case studies in the book. And really, it's just an attempt to join everything up and to really help companies appreciate what's changing and what practical steps they need to take to get that competitive talent advantage.
I'm really interested in the case studies, particularly as sort of a teaser trailer. Do you think you could walk us through one of the case studies that maybe you found particularly interesting or surprised you?
Yeah, I mean there was a few. So Carillion, actually, the one I was just talking about in terms of unconscious bias, that's one of the case studies in the book. Another one that is very interesting is speaking to the guys at Chili's about how they have been sort of getting their message out about what they're like as a place to work, using new channels, using the voices of their employees. The same with CA Technologies, who've been using employee advocates as a way of getting attention of people. There's some interesting stuff from Salesforce in terms of their sort of approach to content marketing in talent pipelines, also looking at sort of various different different types of technology and consulting groups and people who are doing lots of different things. A couple of people who've read it have said it's a very fast-paced book. It sort of it moves very quickly through the landscape to try and give people as much information and kind of an overview as possible. So really sort of covering lots of ground and looking at lots of different aspects of what some great employers are doing.
Yeah. You took the words out of my mouth. I was just about to say it sounds like it covers a ton of ground. With the Chili's case study, was this at the employee brick and mortar level, at the corporate level? Was it kind of all of it? What was sort of that campaign like?
Yeah, I mean, it's still one of the most interesting podcast discussions I've had, actually. The guy I was speaking to, Chris, I think his job title is something like Director of Workplace Experience or something like that. Okay. And it was really what was interesting about it. It was all about how they told the stories of their employees. So how they used Twitter and Instagram to really illustrate what their employees were doing. It came from a kind of a very organic place. They realized that their employees were already talking about them on social media. So a lot of the work that they're doing is tapping into that and sort of amplifying that and recognizing that. And what I thought was really interesting is when they started doing this, they didn't actually have a career site, right. And they built their career site later on in the process. And they see their career site as a place to tell longer form stories about what it's like to work there. And I'd never heard anyone describe a career site like that before. And I thought that was a fascinating kind of take on, the modern approach to recruitment marketing, to talent attraction, this kind of storytelling, authentic, employee voiced based, process, with the career site being a platform for longer form content. And obviously, as someone who produces a podcast as longer form content, that was music to my ears.
Yeah, exactly. And it seems like historically a careers page has just been copy around an apply now button. But at least in the last few years, we've seen companies start to stretch it out a little bit and use it to tell a story. Like the Muse does excellent work with that in terms of making rich video content that focuses on individual employees and sort of allows potential applicants to see like what is life really like there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny, career sites have always sort of been the core of my digital talent acquisition career. Some of the very first things I did in this sector when I was working ad agency side were building, project managing and building career sites kind of back in 99, 2000, which feels like an absolute age ago. And really, they didn't change for many, many years. You could look at career sites that were built 10 or 15 years ago, and, the design tastes may have changed and there might be a bit of move forward in technology, but they're pretty much the same structure, about us, here are the jobs, here's how to apply. And I think that in the last couple of years, it's been great to see, companies really through necessity take their career site much more seriously and really think about what it's for, both as and this is something that we sort of cover extensively in the book, actually. So, the career site as a channel for storytelling, for talking about an employer brand, for giving people a sense of what it's like to work at the company, as a platform for employee stories, but also, on the back end of that, a conversion engine for interest. So, helping to, raise the perception of the employer brand, but also being very, very good from a digital marketing perspective in terms of getting the right people through to apply and making that process easy for them, and hopefully being the start of an excellent candidate experience. And I think it's really interesting to see career sites develop like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the book sounds awesome. I don't want to keep you too much longer. On another note, I love your podcast, Recruiting Future. There's a bunch of other podcasts in the space, and yours is my second favorite after my own. Awesome work.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah. I'm really glad to have met you and brought you on. The book is called Exceptional Talent. You can pre-order it now. I'll have a link for that in the episode description and up on the website. The podcast is called Recruiting Future. The man is Matt Alder. Matt, thank you so much. This has been a blast.
My absolute pleasure. Brilliant to talk to you.